This question that has been raised by the Republicans of being able to use some of the money that normally you would put into Social Security and put it into investments in stocks and bonds.
Well, before I answer that, what I would say is this, and I have a position on that. I don't agree with their position. I look at their plan right now as it pertains even to the death tax, the estate tax. Theirs will cost almost $1 trillion over the next 20 years. That is assuming that this surplus is real. They are also talking about expanding the coverage of Medicare. They're also talking about ensuring the long-term stability of Social Security. I don't know how they accomplish all that and still give all the money away.
Well, it used to be called smoke and mirrors.
It's a lot of smoke and mirrors. But as it pertains to Social Security, it's a very interesting point. I didn't live through the Depression, but my parents did, and certainly my grandparents did. But I do know from my history, and that is when Social Security was created in 1935, 40% of the people at that time were dying in a state of poverty. I mean, they didn't have the ways and means to leave anything on to their children. We know today that over 30% of the people on Social Security today, that is their only source of income. Without Social Security, they would have nothing. So we really haven't come that far in the 65 years that Social Security has been in place. It has been a tremendous social contract between the people and the government and its people. And a tremendous success story, allowing families not only to have money for themselves in the future, but not having to worry so much about saving for the future.
Some security.
Security, putting their children through college, giving their children a better way of life, maybe affording an extra car. Some of the luxuries of life that were reserved to a certain portion of the population was now open to more people.
Well, the other part of it too, it seems. They say that Social Security is going to run out of money in, 2016, 2017, or something like that. Now, if you take money out of Social Security by letting people invest independently, then you're bringing that point much closer to you.
I think the actual number is roughly more about 2035 or so that they were talking about. But you're right in the sense that we would be putting right now something that is socially secure. That's part of the title, security, at the whim of the market. And although I have no problem with people investing in the stock market, and God bless them, they're doing very, very well, and we hope it continues to do so. And it can be supplementary as well, and it ought to be that way. But for people to rely upon that as for many of them, as I said, a third for the sole source of income, it's just not practical. Many people don't have the ways and means, even intellectually. Some people simply will not have that ability to invest properly and invest properly for the future. And that's what Social Security has been about. No matter what happens, you have Social Security.
Well, that's basically the idea behind it. I was here when we enacted Social Security.
Well, if you can also just imagine, I say often, I don't mind, I don't want to see it happen, but if people start jumping off of buildings in Wall Street, that's one thing. We don't need people, when the market crashes or goes down, to, watching MSNBC to see how their retirement is doing. People who are 65, 70, 80 years of age, they don't need that.
I have to cut away from you for just a moment while our local stations cut in.
Okay.
We'll be back to you right after that.
Great.
We're getting some of those answers to the questions that the public has relative to the whole area of Social Security and the like from Representative Joseph Crowley, New York's 7th Congressional District. Lucky 7.
Lucky 7. Been good lucky for me.
Joe, how do you respond to the whole idea that both parties seem to be talking about the question of prescription drugs and how we handle that for the older people of the country? The Democrats have one idea and the Republicans have another. But does it really answer the problem of the old people?
Well, I think, and it's tooting our own horn a bit, I think the focus and direction of this issue has really been derived in many respects from the general public, but has been answered by the minority in our House by the Democratic side, and have really been pushing for prescription drug coverage, I think, vociferously. And I think there are differences, and clear differences now that Governor Bush has come out with his plan, and that Al Gore has, as Vice President Gore has expressed his plan as well. That doesn't differ very much from the President or from our plan in the House here as well. The Governor Bush's plan really does not cover as many people, leaves much of that coverage up to HMOs and to local health organizations to implement that plan. It has a $250 deductible, has no defined benefits, whereas the Al Gore plan covers just about, actually covers just about everyone who wants to be covered.
The question is, though, on that, can we afford that wide coverage?
I think we can afford it. Given what we now know of our surplus, we do know we have a healthy surplus. We're not so convinced, or at least I'm not so convinced, that it's going to be $4 trillion. But we certainly have enough money to modestly expand Medicare. Mm-hmm. This is not a revamping of the Medicare system. And even Governor Bush and others have said that the Medicare system is a shining star of the Great Society. That it is something that really has worked. And I think that Social Security is just another great example of how government can help and can work. It may not be perfect, but it does work for so many people. The opportunity now is for us to cover people who need that coverage. The cost of prescription drugs is just rising and rising and rising on a daily basis. I had a gentleman in my district write me a letter, Mr. Schwartz. He is 84, his wife is 80. His wife needed Prilosec, which is a stomach coating prescription drug. Was paying, I believe, was $349 for 1 month's supply. He had no coverage, and she had to take that with other medications as well. And that is an awful lot of money to expect people in their retired years to have to come up with. Maybe Mr. Schwartz can afford it for this month or the next month or for a few months. But for someone who has to pay that over and over again on a monthly basis, has to make decisions between life and death decisions, paying their rent or paying their home heating oil bills, and taking their prescription drugs, eating their proper foods and taking their prescription drugs, maybe taking their drugs every other day to make sure it lasts long enough so they don't have to go back to the pharmacy to get more. Those are real life and death struggles that are taking place.
It costs more in the end when you consider the fact that the people who cannot afford the prescription then become, they have a greater illness, and then Medicare must pick up.
And there is no question that drugs have been developed that I call them life-extending drugs. And that's really what has happened. People are living longer, much of it based on the fact we have these new wonder drugs that have been created, that have been created right here in the United States, where they've been discovered here. Much at the behest of U.S. taxpayers, we put a lot of money into NIH, National Institute for Health, to do research on much of the drugs that are developed, and to encourage private drug companies to do that research as well. But it's incredible that we have to be treated like Americans in Canada and Mexico as opposed to here in America, where the cost of those drugs that are manufactured and developed here are cheaper in Canada and in Mexico than they are right here in the United States for our seniors. And it's intolerable.